I recently had the pleasure to fly on Concorde Airlines business class on a flight from Seattle to Frankfurt. And here is my review of my experience. I booked the flight using 55,000 Alaska Airlines miles plus $48 in taxes and fees. The cash price for this flight can range from $1,200 to $3,000. So if you find it on the lower end of that range, it could actually be a pretty good deal to just book it with cash rather than using miles. On the other hand, when the cash price is really high, that's when your Alaska Airlines miles can help you save a lot of money. It was a 10.5-hour flight, direct flight from Seattle to Frankfurt. Because I had previously never flown on Concorde Airline, I wanted to do a little bit of research about it, especially because I had a connecting flight from Frankfurt to Helsinki after I land in Frankfurt, and I wanted to see how punctual this airline is. And based on what I read online and by a review of the data, I found out that Concorde is not very punctual, at least not on this route. The flight seemed to be often delayed based on what I saw. And sure enough, when I checked in at the airport for the flight that day, I was told that there would be a 2-hour delay. The flight was scheduled to depart at 4:45 p.m. It didn't actually depart until 6:55 p.m. And the boarding process was rather chaotic. I think that was partly because there was no announcements in German and there were some German passengers waiting to board. And also, it didn't really have enough of a dedicated boarding line. There was another flight to Vancouver, BC, actually boarding at the same time using the gate right next to it. And that actually was what added to the chaos because the two lines were next to each other and all the people for the Concorde flight were congregated around the entrance to the line, and that blocked the passengers for the Vancouver flight. So yeah, it was rather chaotic. I had found some handy websites that provide data about on-time performance, and sure enough, when reviewing this specific route for Concorde Airline, they're only on time 58% of the time. That's pretty low in my opinion. At the time when I reviewed the data, it showed that the average delay was around 38 minutes with a max of being over 2 hours, which was basically consistent with what I experienced. Now, the interior of the plane was actually quite nice. It's definitely up there for me when it comes to the different business class options that I've had the pleasure of trying out for transatlantic flights. The aircraft that was used for this Seattle to Frankfurt flight was an Airbus A330-900neo. The business class was configured in a 1-2-1 seating configuration with seats on the sides alternating between being closer to the window versus being closer to the aisle. The center seats alternated between being honeymoon seats, where the two seats are next to each other in the center, or each seat being closer to the aisle and separated by a shared console. Overall, there were 310 seats on the flight, with 216 in economy, 64 in premium economy, and 30 in business class. I was impressed by the size and quality of the TV screen in the seat back. It was also a nice touch to have a mattress pad available for each business class passenger. For this flight, I selected a window seat where the seat is closer to the window than the aisle so that it could offer more privacy, and I really enjoyed having that seat on this flight. The seats were 180 degrees lie flat. In bed mode, it was 199 centimeters long. I really appreciated the many different charging ports that were available. The TV screens were 17.3 inches and 4K. It could be controlled via touchscreen or via a remote control. One of my favorite features about this flight and seating actually is that table unfolds with the push of a button from below the TV monitor. So rather than having to pull out a table from your armrest area, which is typically the case for business class flights internationally, this table was below the monitor, and I actually really like that feature about it. A bag of packaged nuts was waiting for me on my seat along with an amenity kit. I wasn't very impressed with the amenity kit given that it was in a cardboard container. I much prefer the stylish reusable bags that typical amenity kits come in. The kit itself contained socks, eye cover, toothbrush, toothpaste, lip balm, and lotion. Earplugs were available upon request. The flight did come with slippers for business class passengers, and that's kind of a unique perk on this flight, given that typically European international business class does not offer slippers. Asian airlines international business class do usually offer slippers. So it was nice to get slippers on this flight. And of course, I did enjoy the mattress pad that was provided for each business class passenger. I found out afterwards, after the flight, that I was missing a luggage organizer that should have also came with my seat. I didn't find out until my travel companion shared with me that they had received a luggage organizer as well. So I missed out on it because I didn't realize I didn't get a chance to ask. Because this flight was an evening departure with an early afternoon arrival, dinner and breakfast services were provided. Usually for international business class, I've experienced having snacks being offered in between the meal services, as well as a snack area being established in the galley near the business class. However, I did not notice one for this flight. I didn't see a snack area. I might have missed it, but I did actually try to look for it to see if one was available and to see what selections were available for snacks, but I couldn't find one. Here's the starter course for my dinner on the flight. It was actually quite tasty. I especially enjoyed the tuna that was included. For the dinner entree, I selected the veal cheeks. It was okay. For dessert, there was only one option, and it was the lemon tartlet, and I took one bite and had to waste the rest of it. It was not very good, unfortunately. For breakfast, I had a warm croissant as well as an omelet with fruits, and it was good, but nothing to really write home about. My overall impression of the Condor Airline business class was that it can be a less expensive option to fly to Europe in business class using miles or cash. It actually offers some pretty decent one-way prices for business class, so that could be a great way to spend cash and fly business class if there's a good cash deal going on, because oftentimes the one-way prices are significantly more than half of round trip, but for Concorde, they are actually very reasonable and half of round trip usually, and you can find some really great cash deals. The cabin for the aircraft was very stylish and modern, which I appreciated, and all the seats for business class had direct aisle access, which is definitely a big plus. The entertainment options on the flight were very solid. I appreciated that for sure. Some of the negatives of my flight experience included the taste of the food. The food overall was just kind of mediocre, in my opinion, and I'm not really even a picky eater at all. The service was, I would describe as sufficient. The flight attendants were decent, but not overly friendly and not overly wanting to provide additional assistance if they didn't have to, was kind of the impression that I got. When I was trying to find a flight attendant to get some earplugs before going to sleep, I couldn't find one, for example. There was the lack of snacks in between meals. Not that I was necessarily hungry, but it's always nice to have that option if someone is hungry. I only noticed one bathroom being associated for business class. And so for a business class with 30 passengers potentially, that seems like very few restrooms. I feel like usually the business class international flights that I've flown on had at least 2 bathrooms dedicated to business class passengers. And of course, finally, there seems to be significant number of flights that are delayed, especially on this route. I'm not sure about other Concorde Airline flight routes, but at least between Seattle and Frankfurt, there were oftentimes delays. So that's something important to keep in mind, especially if you're planning a connection flight, to make sure not to have too tight of a connection. I hope this information was helpful to you, especially if you're considering a flight on Concorde Airline. Thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.